we are learning that the CIA is also working to trigger some sort of an uprising inside of Iran. Now, this is a major and potentially explosive development in the war. So let me tell you what we know here with these breaking details. Multiple people familiar with the plan are telling CNN that the Trump administration is working to arm Kurdish forces, who they then expect to take part in a ground operation in Iran in the coming days. Let's get to this crucial reporting. The CIA working to arm Kurdish forces to stage some sort of a major ground operation going inside Iran. They want to spark an uprising. The details are incredible. What are you learning?
That's right, Erin. It's a lot to unpack, honestly. This story continues to develop at a breakneck speed and often in mind-bending ways. We spent some time this evening with a senior Iranian Kurdish politician here in Iraqi Kurdistan who basically told us that the expectation among Kurdish Iranian opposition forces is that they will be going into Western Iran as part of some kind of a ground operation over the course or at some point during the next few days, that they will have support from the U.S. and from Israel, though he would not be drawn as to what exactly that support will look like. He also told us that President Trump himself had called the leader of the KDPI, which is one of these Iranian Kurdish opposition parties, today, and that they had what he characterized, I should say, as a positive conversation, though again, he did not give any details, and he said that we should be prepared for some surprises potentially tomorrow. Again, not giving details, but this is all coming at the same time as our colleagues Natasha Bertrand, Elena Treen, and Zachary Cohen are learning that the CIA has been working to arm Iranian Kurdish opposition forces with the goal of fomenting civil unrest in Iran. And they spoke to a number of different officials who characterized it in different ways. Some talked about sort of basically trying to pin down Iranian forces to create buffer zones where ordinary Iranians who are unarmed would have more freedom to go out on the streets and protest. Certainly our source that we spoke to said that the focus is very much on establishing control of a sort of semi-autonomous Kurdish run area of Iran, sort of like what you see here in Iraqi Kurdistan. But I mean, I can't even begin, Erin, honestly, to get into the manifold reasons why this is incredibly fraught with risk and complexity. But one just off the top of my head is the leadership here in Iraqi Kurdistan, who have complex and challenging but vital relationships with Turkey, with Iran, who have made it clear that they want to be neutral in this conflict, and who are now potentially being put in a position of having to support this operation, whatever it's going to look like, because it's not going to be possible, realistically, to get supplies, weapons, training, etc., to these Iranian Kurdish forces without using Iraqi Kurdistan territory, which is because that's where they are. They are here along this border. So this is a rapidly developing story, and again, it's a lot to digest, and remains to be seen how, when Iran sees this reporting, is going to respond. Erin.
The United States, the CIA, is planning to rely on Kurdish Iranian forces to somehow cross in the border and awaken forces inside, some of which may have been earlier supplied with weapons or not, in some sort of an uprising. Yeah. Okay, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in the politest form, this is probably not a good idea for multiple different reasons. If you're dealing with the United States, whose president is saying they didn't really have time to put in an evacuation plan for US citizens
for
here.
Americans, yeah.
then trying to enact this, which is essentially an insurgency, which you need weapons, that takes a lot of time for serious planning. Now, the Kurds in the region are desperate for autonomy. They'll offer anything to anybody to have the shot at that potentially. They've just been shut down, really, the Syrian Kurds in Syria by the new government there.
Right.
Another reminder, when the Syrian Kurds were last used by the United States before that betrayal in Syria, then they needed US special forces and air cover for 2 years to take out the ISIS caliphate, which covered a much, much smaller area than 90 million people of Iran. So the task is enormous. And so essentially, I think what we're seeing here is a US plan for a protracted sense of civil war, ultimately, in Iran. The notion that this force, if magicked out of nowhere, can distract Iranian security
somehow
forces.
if you give someone a gun, they're gonna go use it
Or it's
against
going
their
to confuse the police and RGC so much that the popular uprising will take over. Naive, I'm afraid. It feels like a suddenly reached solution that someone's desperately handed in the hope that it will give the Kurds some more traction here. And so it leaves me slightly concerned that this may be the beginning of the ground notion, the sort of next phase of all of this. Not well thought through, I think, is certainly a fair way to discuss it, and a departure which could potentially see something go on here for years.
Kareem, what do you think?
I do think this is a strategy of potentially playing with fire. The Kurds in Iran are wonderful people who've suffered tremendously under the Islamic Republic, but they constitute only 10% of the country's population. So they're never going to be able to really constitute an existential threat to the regime in Tehran. At the same time, I would argue the greatest countervailing force against the radical Islamism of the Iranian regime is Iranian nationalism, and I would say pluralistic Iranian nationalism, a nationalism that encompasses Persians, Kurds, Azeris, and others. And there's a real danger here, Aaron, that if Iranians feel that it's a US strategy to essentially try to factionalize and splinter the country, that's something that they're very sensitive about. And I think that the vast majority of Iranians will be opposed to any outside attempts to try to threaten the territorial integrity of the country.
This is fascinating. I'm thinking what President Pezeshkian said to me and other reporters in the fall when he talked about how what happened last summer. He said strengthened national belief in the system. Now, obviously, they were mass demonstrations, so that was their spin. But I think it goes to the point that you're making, Kareem, in some adjacent way. General Marks, we're just getting something in that I want to share with you here as Kareem was speaking, and that is some new information from the commander of U.S. Central Command, Admiral Cooper. He just said that the United States is, quote, I'm going to give you the exact quote here, sinking the Iranian Navy, the entire Navy. Now, he just said they've destroyed 17 Iranian ships. I don't know whether this is apples to apples, but President Trump said the other night that they had destroyed 9 ships. I believe that was 2 nights ago. So, you know, if that number was accurate and this is accurate, it's now double in the past 48 hours. Can you put that in context of how meaningful that is?
Sure, it's very meaningful. What Admiral Cooper is indicating, along with what the president said, is that the Iranian Navy is ineffective. It has no ability to affect traffic, to mine the Straits of Hormuz, to interdict flow of oil in or out, however they want to try to execute that. So what we're seeing is, not to parse numbers, but what we're seeing is Iranian Navy that has no capacity at this point. And Aaron, if I can, if we go back to what the Kurds are trying to achieve, I've got to tell you, this has less to do with fractionalization and more to do with what I would call an economy of force. If the Kurds get into the north, this becomes a distraction that the regime's going to have to deal with. It will not turn the tide. No one is suggesting that. But there obviously are some immense threats and risks associated with that. But I think we need to put a pin on it. It's more an economy effort than it is an effort to try to flip the regime.
All right, so Nick, as we're trying to understand what Iran's doing and what's behind, their decisions of when they're striking here and what missiles they're using and when they're striking a consulate and when they're striking Al Udeid, there's been this real question of who's in charge. We know Ali Larijani's been doing a lot. We know that the president of Iran is still alive, Pezeshkian, okay, but the supreme leader is dead. Almost all of the leadership in so many important ways is gone. And now we're hearing that the senior clerics tasked with choosing a new supreme leader met today. They met virtually. Apparently, there was a strike on a location. The Iranian state media said it was evacuated. We don't know yet if they did make a selection. Okay, but what do you make of the way the war's been conducted? When we're what? Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. We're now on Wednesday morning. We're in the 5th day now of this war.
It feels
without
like a lot longer than
formal
5
leader.
days,
It
doesn't
sure
it?
does.
But
It
yeah.
sure does. But without a formal leader.
I mean, it is kind of startling, to be honest.
Yeah.
I can see why they're reluctant, because the survivability of leadership right now is not particularly strong in Iran. But it goes to this key point of who is ultimately calling the shots. This is a society that has had autocracy in its bones for decades here. So relying on one voice to tell them procedures like what's ahead of them in wartime is utterly essential. And so we have these 88 senior clerics who've met today, the Assembly of Experts, the building bomb. They meet online. What is the ultimate result from all of this? And it does feed, I think, into this potential concern that we heard in the opening hours of this conflict from the foreign minister, Saeed Araji, who essentially said that this was a decentralized mosaic defense, that they'd given orders to parts of the military prior to Khamenei's death of what to do if this happened. And this may be what we're seeing, that the reason why this is so persistent and retaliation is so broad is people are doing things they were told to do potentially
And they're sticking with it.
months ago, and they're sticking with it. Now, this is really perilous because they're not adapting to the situation. They're not potentially able to seize off-ramps or diplomacy because there's nobody ultimately
Who
calling
do you talk
the
to?
shot.
Yeah.
And until we have that name, I think it's going to be incredibly hard for Trump to reach for diplomacy.